Welcome to Maritime Pakistan, your gateway to the fascinating world of oceans and the opportunities they present to every one of us. Our goal is to explore the shared heritage of the seas and oceans to achieve global prosperity. Today's discussion explores the book The Sea in History, the Ancient World. Specifically, our discussion will focus on the 22nd chapter, The Roman Empire and the Seas, written by Phyllis Culham.
You know what's really fascinating about this heavily researched material is how completely it flips the script on the Romans. Think about it. We almost always picture them as these heavily armed, land-based legionaries just marching endlessly across Europe, right? But, as Culham's research reveals, they were actually the accidental architects of an ancient global maritime economy. They didn't really set out to conquer the oceans for glory. No way. They just ended up completely mastering them out of pure, absolute necessity.
Before we get into the nuts and bolts of how they actually pulled this off, let's establish our core concept for today, the oikomene. When Augustus Caesar took power, he had this unprecedented opportunity to foster a sprawling, completely sea-connected civilization. Basically, this was a culturally homogeneous world at sea, all united by massive trade networks and shared maritime infrastructure. It was just a brand new way of organizing an empire.
Okay, let's take a quick look at our roadmap. Today, we're covering Rome's hidden ocean highway, how they fed the Roman Empire, the constant battle against pirates, insurgents, and patrols, their role as master builders of ports, and finally, the ancient global economy. It's an incredible journey, so let's just dive right in. Section 1. Rome's hidden ocean highway, controlling the Mediterranean. So, the real turning point happens in 31 BC. The naval battle of Actium left Augustus in a completely unique historical position. Literally, he found himself governing an entire sea completely surrounded by land subordinated to him. Just think about that for a second. He had absolutely zero strategic-level naval opponents in sight, no rival kings, no competing empires out on the water. For all intents and purposes, the Mediterranean was essentially a Roman lake.
And the absolute crux of this is captured perfectly in a quote from the source material. The tail which wagged the Roman sea dog was grain shipments. This massive maritime network, it wasn't built for glorious naval battles. Honestly, it was built out of the sheer, terrifying necessity to prevent famine. I mean, Rome had a population of around 500,000 people at the time. Keeping them fed meant moving absolute mountains of grain across the water. So it was survival, not conquest, that actually drove their maritime innovation.
Section 2. Feeding the Roman Empire, the logistics of survival.
Now this brilliantly illustrates the massive divide in ancient seafaring. On one hand, you have local coastal coasting. We're talking small-time traders and fishermen making short jumps, just hoping to sell a temporary surplus. Totally unpredictable. But on the flip side, the imperial economy relied on a highly organized, long-distance grain trade. This was predictable, it was backed by a common currency, and it was protected by massive military escorts. We're literally looking at two completely different worlds operating on the exact same water.
Securing all this grain forced Rome to set up massive operations, and the ripple effects were honestly astounding. To protect these huge shipments, they created highly organized transport fleets, like the Classis Alexandrina, which was essentially a massive escort squadron from Egypt. Having this reliable food supply supported gigantic urban markets like Rome and Antioch, which in turn enabled a specialized division of labor. Basically, by simply trying to feed its capital, Rome accidentally jump-started a robust cosmopolitan trade network that completely changed the demographics of the ancient world.
Section 3. Pirates, insurgents, and patrols. The real naval threat.
You really have to forget the grand sea battles from the movies. Roman fleets were actually engaged in constant, low-level policing. Their main enemies? Part-time pirates. Often, these were just struggling farmers or fishermen driven to the sea by a single bad harvest. Or they were political insurgents resisting Roman rule, like we saw during the First Jewish War. These groups used cheap, tiny craft to swarm larger Roman ships. It made them an incredibly frustrating, highly decentralized threat to that all-important grain supply. So, how exactly do you fight a decentralized swarm like that? Well, with pure pragmatism. The Romans, ironically, had very little interest in actual naval glory. So instead of endlessly chasing these agile little pirate boats around the open sea, they simply eliminated the pirates by systematically destroying their bases on land. Plus, they heavily relied on Greek seafaring experts to actually man their fleets. They were just totally pragmatic problem solvers, completely avoiding major sea battles in favor of methodical on-land eradication. A perfect example of this Roman pragmatism is the Liburnian. See, the Romans didn't even bother inventing new ships from scratch. They literally just adapted the successful designs of their enemies. They took a vessel originally developed by Adriatic pirates, made it heavier, wider, and packed it with way more men to row its 2 levels. And just like that, this became the standard patrol vessel of the Mediterranean, a heavy utility ship designed specifically for the unglamorous, everyday job of coastal policing.
Section 4. Master Builders of Ports, Engineering the Coastline.
If you really want to understand Roman dominance, you have to look at their engineering. They literally reshaped the coastlines. I mean, where nature hadn't provided a safe harbor, the Romans just went ahead and built one from scratch. They would actually take old, decommissioned ships, fill them to the brim with this special hydraulic volcanic concrete, and deliberately sink them to form the foundation of massive artificial breakwaters. After that, they'd dig out entirely new inner harbors. It was just an absolute, astonishing display of environmental mastery.
And this sheer engineering willpower birthed what we can only call megaports. Portus Ostiensius was built specifically to manage those massive grain fleets feeding Rome, essentially moving the entire unloading zone from the river right out to the open sea. Meanwhile, over in the east, King Herod utilized Roman engineering to build Sebastus at Caesarea, which became the largest artificial harbor in the entire Mediterranean. These weren't just simple docks. They grew into massive, thriving, cosmopolitan cities in their own right, entirely generated by Roman political will and, well, a whole lot of concrete.
Even their military bases were absolute engineering marvels. Take Misenum, near the Bay of Naples, for instance. It was this massive naval complex complete with inner and outer harbors, plus dry docks for ship maintenance. The scale of construction was so immense that it permanently altered the regional drainage of the surrounding landscape. We're talking changes that are actually still visible today. They literally reshaped the Earth itself to support the massive fleets required to protect the choke points of the Mediterranean.
Section 5. The Ancient Global Economy, Reaching Beyond the Mediterranean.
Now, far beyond the safety of the Red Sea, merchants were engaging in high-risk, high-reward international trade that required incredible navigational knowledge. They built these amazingly sturdy ships and learned to time their voyages perfectly to ride the seasonal monsoons. They'd sail outward in the summer, catching the southwest wind, and then make the return journey in the winter on the northeast wind. They were sailing directly across the open Indian Ocean, which was a massive, unprecedented leap in ancient maritime capability.
The sheer variety of goods being exchanged absolutely proves the Roman Empire was an active participant in what was basically the very first true world economic system. The Romans were exporting Mediterranean wine, precious tin and copper, and that highly sought-after purple-dyed cloth. In return, they were bringing in Chinese silk, Indian cotton, spices, pearls, and incredibly rare gems. It was a completely thriving, highly interconnected global exchange.
And the global impact of this trade was just staggering. Now, the Roman emperors happily collected taxes on all these luxury imports, but what they probably didn't even realize was that their exported metals, especially tin and copper, were actually fueling manufacturing in ancient India and Southeast Asia. On top of that, Roman gold coins were flowing eastward in such massive quantities that they practically became a standard for settling accounts all the way in South Asia.
But tragically, no empire lasts forever, right? The 3rd century crisis, which spanned roughly AD 235 to 284, brought devastating civil war, plague, and foreign invasions. As resources were pulled away to fight on land, those vital naval patrols just stopped. And that beautiful interconnected maritime web, it completely collapsed. The long-distance trade routes broke down, isolating far-off partners like the Aksumite Empire, and ultimately splitting the Mediterranean world in half. The oikumene was just fractured forever.
This ancient history really leaves us with a critical modern realization. Think about it. If an empire as vast and powerful as Rome can fracture simply because its shipping lanes break down, just how fragile is our incredibly sea-dependent world today? It's definitely a provocative thought to leave you with as you look at our modern global supply chains. We hope that you liked today's explainer. Please share your comments and subscribe to explore other similar opportunities. Post your questions in the comment section for future explainers.